Hello and welcome to the Space News Commercial Space Transformers series, where we aim to give you a behind-the-scenes look at the people and companies driving the space industry's commercial transformation. I'm Jason Rainbow, senior staff writer at Space News, and today I'll be talking to Tess Hatch, who has just joined investment bank Stifel as a managing director after many years of investing in space in the venture capital world. With the space investment landscape constantly shifting, Tess has had a front row seat to how startups are securing funding and scaling their businesses. Yes, great to have you here. You've had an impressive career investing in space startups, and now you're bringing that expertise to Stifel. So I'm excited to hear your thoughts on how space companies are navigating today's financial landscape.
Thank you for having me. Thrilled to be here.
Yeah, so you've gone from venture investing to a banking role. How do the two differ in their approach to supporting space startups?
In my prior role as an investor at Bessemer Venture Partners, I was investing equity into businesses, so giving businesses cash in exchange for ownership or equity in their business. In my role at Stifel, no ownership, but I'm giving them debt. So providing them with a different asset class. You own your business, you maintain your largest shareholder on your own cap table, but in exchange you got to pay me back with some interest in a few years. So that's the difference in terms of the asset class. Additionally, there's just a different deal flow volume. As an equity investor, you're making, let's say, 0 to 2 deals a year. At a bank, sometimes you're underwriting multiple deals a week. Now, those are the differences, but I want to emphasize the similarities. And this is why I really enjoy this new role, is that I'm still supporting the ecosystem as a partner to these investments or clients or companies. But rather than as a board member of, let's say, 5 to 10 companies, I'm supporting the ecosystem in terms of tens or hundreds, if not more, clients. So what I really enjoy about Stifel is the relationship you're developing with your clients, and we're acting like a partner. We're there in helping the company grow as quickly and efficiently as it can. And just the magnitude or the quantity is a lot larger now.
That's awesome, and that's especially helpful as these companies are no doubt navigating certain financial markets and just broadly across the space industry too. How would you describe the current state of investment in space, and are there any trends or shifts that stand out to you regarding just where this year may be heading at least?
Biggest trend is every space company is marketing itself as a defense tech company right now because of the froth and the appeal of a defense tech go to market. And a little bit on defense tech for a second, and then I'll go back to Jason, our favorite topic of space. But a second on defense. I'm going to make this shorter. The DoD updated its way in contracting with startups that lowered the barrier of entry. So, when, let's say, 5 to 10 years ago, having a government only go to business market may have spooked investors because of the point dependency on working with just the DoD, and they would have preferred a healthy blend of commercial and government customers. Now, a government only business model is there's appetite for. The government is a large, strong, exciting brand and very sticky once you land with the government. There's a lot of room for expansion. Now, there still are the cons of what made, maybe investors hesitant before. Really long sales cycle, really large upfront capital investment to eventually land that contract, really lumpy, bumpy, unpredictable contract sizes, and you have a really large Q3 to the fiscal year ending in September. But okay, so that's the biggest trend. You asked about trends.
Mhm.
A lot of space tech companies are marketing as a defense tech company. You also asked about the current state of investment in space. And this one, I'd like to, go back a handful of years. And if we rewinded to, let's say, 2010, Skybox, a company that thought to put a camera on a smaller form satellite and throw it into space, sold to Google 4 years later in 2014 for $500 million. And a lot of investors heard 4 years and $500 million. That's a lot of money in a short period of time.
Mm,
What's
mm.
this space thing? It kind of sounds like SaaS, right? And they started exploring, and lots of people put money into the industry in 2014 and made investments in a whole slew of companies. And then a handful of years went by and nothing happened. There weren't any further liquidity events like Skybox. There weren't further market validation or data points that really proved that space is a venture backable industry with a good return on their investment within a reasonable time horizon. So, 2010 Skybox formed, 2014 it sold to Google. Let's say we're 2021, we're still waiting for those exits. And that was the year of the space SPACs. You can't spell space without SPAC. We had those exits. We finally did have those liquidity events. We had about a dozen companies go public via a special purpose acquisition company, and these private space companies were now publicly available. Now, I would argue a handful of those are trading really well. Rocket Lab is trading well, Planet is trading really well, and are continuing that path Skybox set with some data points on liquidity or returns of equity investment in the category. But I'd also argue there weren't the strongest, there still aren't that many. We're still sort of waiting on more returns, on more exits, on more movement in the industry. So I used to pound my fist on the table saying, hey, we need more exits in this industry for investment to continue going into the industry. And then the SPACs happened, and I'm still sort of pounding my fist on the table making that point.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that evolution in the market because, and this will be a blast from the past. In 2017, you put together this infographic on the market landscape as it was back then, separated into various sectors. Some of these companies are sadly no longer with us, of course, or have changed their name. But looking back at this nearly 10 years on, what are some of the big things that strike you that have changed?
Yeah, I actually, as I was listening to your prior episode with Sunil Nagaraj, I joined Bessemer right after he departed to continue working on the space investment thesis he had created. And that included making this infographic that I think is being shown right here. And now, fast forward 8 years, looking back on it, my biggest sort of takeaway is how relevant and applicable it still is. 8 years later, you're going to recognize the good over three-fourths, if not 90% of the logos on the screen.
Hmm.
But I have three sort of sub observations. One of them is the amount of vertical integration amongst the businesses. So let's use Rocket Lab, for example. When I made it in 2017, Rocket Lab was just a launch vehicle. Now it's become a satellite company. It has the Photon. It's become a materials and components company. It acquired a solar panel company, among other things. And who knows, like maybe it'll become an operator. Let's use, SpaceX you can use as well with Starlink. It's operating a constellation of satellites to provide the world with ubiquitous internet connectivity. Two, a trend that's happened since then is a lot of these logos are public companies. When I made it
Hmm.
in 2017, they were all private. Now, Planet, Spire, Rocket Lab, Velo, Astra, but then not went public via SPAC.
Hmm.
So a lot of these logos are now public rather than private entities. Um, the third is I would add the current buckets as they are still applicable. I would just add one new one sort of in the top left hand side. And that one I would sort of call post Starship. Starships really opened up the secondary and tertiary technologies to come to fruition. For example, that would include larger form satellites like K2 and Apex, and that would also include all like the space taxis that are taking the satellite from the rocket to its exact orbital slot, like Impulse. Um, so I said there would be three. Those are my three biggest takeaways. And then, sort of as like a personal note, I'm like, space tourism didn't grow as I was hoping because I really want to take a selfie in space. So please help me out. Like keep growing that one. I want to get up there and experience the overview effect.
Are there any companies or subsectors that have surprised you by their resilience or unexpected success, say?
Am surprised that there aren't more launch vehicle options.
Hmm.
Today, SpaceX and Rocket Lab are the two largest consistent, reliable launch vehicles. I was hoping 8 years later there would maybe be three, four, or five. So that's maybe on the pessimistic side of your question. In terms of an optimistic take on it, I am thrilled but delighted in the operator piece. So those are basically constellations of satellites. The two largest have been Earth observation, taking photos of the Earth, and communications, communicating with the Earth. I'm talking to you right now via Starlink because I don't have Wi-Fi where I live. But doubling down, it is so exciting and amazing the imagination of entrepreneurs that are imagining unique sensors in a constellation in space. So, for example, there is a group of us brilliant Stanford students that are working on a constellation, sort of like a GPS constellation. There is the former CEO and founder of Robinhood is building a constellation of satellites in space. His company is called Atherflux, and he is taking the power from the sun, harvesting it with solar panels in space, and then using wireless power transfer via laser to power the world. Imagine, instead of ubiquitous internet connectivity, ubiquitous power supply.
Mhm, mhm.
So I'm really amazed and I'm excited about the future of the constellation bucket on more unique sensors that really can only be in space to benefit here life on Earth.
There is so much to be excited about. But what about areas that are perhaps overhyped from a commercial standpoint? Do you have any thoughts on any sectors or group of companies?
Okay, in terms of over and underhyped categories.
Mhm,
Um, I've always sort of been confused about satellite propulsion companies. I would really like help me understand because at any point over the last decade, there have been three, four, five, 10. However, who are they selling to? Like Starlink is vertically integrated. They're going to build their own propulsion. Okay, there's Kuiper. There was OneWeb, but the mega constellations are probably going to vertically integrate this, either build it themselves or acquire one of these. And then a lot of satellites, like when I was on the board of Spire many years ago, I don't know the update now, they didn't have active propulsion. They sort of had passive propulsion where you would just turn the gyros in the X, Y, or Z direction to orient your spacecraft. And then you would speed up or slow down depending on the drag of whatever surface area was facing the vacuum of space. So satellite propulsion has always been a little confusing for me in terms of why there's so many in the space. Um, in terms of, so I guess what I view that over. Um, One other over is, but I'm the
mhm.
biggest cheerleader for manufacturing in space. I really want that one to work out. Really want the unit economics to make sense.
And it has
In
to
terms
eventually.
of, excuse me.
It has to eventually, right? In order to enable all these other cool things like solar power generators in orbit.
It has to, hopefully it will. In terms of, we can change temperature and pressure on Earth, but we're stuck with 1G. We're stuck with the weight that we weigh. In space, we can change pressure, we can change temperature, and we can change how much, force we're putting on the material so that fiber optic cable can be pulled with zero imperfections, or pharmaceutical drugs can be manufactured in a way to cure cancer. You use your imagination. That one I really hope works out because looking back and tying it back to the infographic one more time, in 2017, that top left bucket of space tourism and space debris removal and manufacturing in space and mining asteroids in space, the engineer in me, the aerospace engineer in me, would be so excited about the future of all of those industries. But I had to put my aerospace engineering hat off and put my investor hat on. And I've had to think of, is this going to return in the next 5 to 7, maybe 10 years? In 2017, the answer
Mhm,
was no. And
mhm.
and and now I'm still, asking those questions.
Brilliant place to leave it. Tess, thank you so much for sharing your insights. It's been great hearing your perspective on not only space investment, but commercialization and how the industry is evolving and evolving fast. Looking forward to seeing what's next for you at Stifel.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Always great chatting.